Hi guys, it's Jamie and I have another hero guide for you. This time we're looking at the recently released Centurion. Centurion has low standard damage, but his attacks are very fast and his combos are deadly to both hit points and stamina. There are of course other guides out there, but these don't tend to focus on high level play or optimizing damage. They tend to be more geared towards entry level players. We'll start simply with the basic damage profile before moving on to optimization with parries and punishes. Okay, so when it comes to light attacks, Centurion sits towards the bottom of the table, and his heavies are the weakest alongside Valkyrie and Conqueror. Normally I'd recommend mixing between random heavies and lights when at neutral with your opponent, but for Centurion there's a couple reasons why you may want to rethink this. Firstly, Centurion's heavy attacks are as fast as the lights of most of the other heroes and only 100 milliseconds slower than his own lights. Secondly, the range of his light attacks are beyond pathetic. You really have to be well inside your opponent's comfort zone for them to hit. And thirdly, with a couple of exceptions, primarily Valkyrie and Conqueror, light attacks are a lot more punishable than heavy attacks, so you may not want to use these quite so much when you have such an easy alternative. Throwing lights is fine, but when at neutral with Centurion, I would strongly advise the majority of your poke attacks to be a mixture of uncharged heavies, charged heavies, and soft cancels, which I'll go over in more detail later. Charging a standard heavy doesn't increase its damage unless it's at the end of a chain, after a kick, or after a throw, in which case it will be unblockable and deal 30 damage instead of the standard 25. You also don't need to charge your heavies entirely. Charging one midway benefits you in the sense that it gives a different parry timing, so it might throw your opponent off. As there are an infinite number of charge levels for your charged heavy, technically there's an infinite number of parry timings that your opponent has to be aware of, so play around with this. Next we're going to run through some basic but essential mechanics for Cent, the first of which is his heavy soft cancel into guard break. Centurion and Peacekeeper are the only two heroes in the game that can do this, and it's extremely potent against opponents who are confident in their parrying. So how it works, when charging any heavy attack on Centurion, simply press the guard break button, and there you have it. This differs from a hard cancel in the sense that you don't have to press the cancel button to stop your heavy attack before guard breaking. You can do this anywhere from the beginning of the charge all the way up until very late. Again, play around with this and change it up to confuse your opponents. Something important to note here is that on heavies that would normally charge into an unblockable, a soft cancel will still play the audio cue, and a late-ish soft cancel will still actually glow orange like an unblockable attack before cancelling into that guard break. From your perspective, you won't see this, but your opponent will. This is likely due to the small amount of latency between both players. This orange glow, combined with the audio cue, is enough to trick even the most suspecting opponent into going for that parry, therefore giving the free guard break, unless they happen to also be a Centurion, but more about that later. Another simple mechanic to note is his kick game. It's good from neutral, and it's even better when it's used to punish an out of stamina opponent. Against slower reacting opponents, you can play the game of mixing up dash kicks into dash guard breaks to hopefully catch a preemptive dodge. Against opponents with a decent reaction speed, this won't work. The kick is more than dodgeable on reaction alone. The opponents who do dodge may want to try and punish you with a guard break. This doesn't work. Your kick chains immediately into a heavy if you choose. Simply cue a heavy attack during your kick animation and it will come out as soon as it's finished, so any guard breaks that come your way will be punished with a 25 damage to the face. When your opponent stops looking for guard breaks and instead tries to look for these parries from your heavy attacks, switch it up and use a charged one instead. Something important to note about the kick is in reference to heroes who might seek to punish with moves of their own. Warden and Lawbringer, for example, like to punish with their shoves. In the case of Warden, their shoulder bash will be cancelled every single time by your heavy straight from kick. And when it comes to Lawbringer, you can still go for that heavy which will hit before their shove and trade it out with their light attack which will come out after their shove. Apart from that, if your opponent's on their last bar of HP and you notice their guard stance is not to your left, a landed kick will confirm the first attack from your zone attack, which is enough to finish them off. The last simple but important mechanic for Centurion players is particularly important when facing players who like to feint into attacks a lot. This applies to all opposition heroes, especially Kenseis and Berserkers, but if you find your opponent feinting a heavy into light or feinting a heavy into heavy or anything along those lines, then don't be too afraid to let your parry fly. Your heavy attacks are fast enough that if a Kensei, for example, feints a top heavy into a top light, your heavy attack to parry the initial attack is quick enough to hit them before their light comes out, well, before their light hits you. Just be a bit careful in doing this too much, because if they see this and decide to feint without follow-up, then you're going to give them a free parry. Now let's talk about parrying and how to squeeze the most amount of damage out of each type of parry. First, let's talk about your standard light parry in an open area with no walls nearby. From each light parry, excluding those against Conquerors of course, you can land a fully charged heavy into a fully charged jab and then finish this off with your Eagle's Talons while they're on the ground. In total, this is going to grant you 60 damage as well as their entire stamina bar. Something vital to note here is that you must change your guard stance to a different one from the direction that the attack that you parried came from. Otherwise it could get blocked or parried in return. So if you parried a top light attack, then follow this up with a left side charged heavy or a right side charged heavy. If you parried a right side light attack, then follow this up with a left side charged heavy or a top side charged heavy, you know. Second, what to do if you parry a heavy in the open and your opponent isn't a long-ranged opponent, for example Nobushi or Valkyrie. The simple answer to this is that you get a guard break, and from this guard break you go into a non-charged heavy attack. That's 25 damage, which is enough to finish off their last bar of HP. I personally like to follow this up with either a non-charged jab into a free light or a second heavy soft cancelled into a guard break, which will catch anybody who tries to dodge the jab. Now for the juicy damage. Centurion is particularly brutal when fighting near walls. There are two situations to look out for here which will dictate which kind of punish you're going to inflict. These punishes can be applied to both light and heavy attacks as long as your opponent is within guard break range. First, you need to pay attention to the angle that you and your opponent dissect the wall at. If you're at a bit of an odd angle and you think that the follow-up punch from the charged heavy is not going to knock them back into the wall again, then go with the first punish. What you want to do is you want to guard break them after your parry into two special light attacks before throwing them into the wall. We then follow this up with a charged heavy, then a heavy jab into your Eagle's Talon attack while they're on the floor. The reason we do the two special lights is because they're free, they help to drain stamina in case something goes wrong, for example, and unless these would drop them to 0 stamina, there's really no negative to this. Due to the charged heavy being after a throw, your total damage will be 65. That's 5 more damage than the light parry punish, as well as the added stamina drain from the lights, just in case they regen some just before you guard break. The second punish can be performed if you can throw your opponent into a wall so that they land in a position where the follow-up jab will hit them back into the wall again. If this is the case, then lucky you. From the date that I'm posting this video, everything within this combo seems confirmed, although if it is entirely confirmed, then this will likely get removed as it's pretty broken. Anyway, after parrying your opponent, what you want to do is those two special lights into a throw onto the wall into a charged heavy, just like before. Next, we're going to follow up with a non-charged jab, which will throw them back into the wall and stagger them just long enough for you to charge another heavy and pin them again. From this one, you do a fully charged jab and then into your Eagle's Talons, just as before. In total, if done correctly, you'll have landed 90 damage and your opponent will be completely out of stamina again. The timing for this combo is a little odd, so it might take some practice, but the 90 damage is well worth it. Like I said, if this really is all confirmed, then there's almost definitely a nerf coming. But hey, maybe my opponents have just been too overwhelmed by the whole thing and just forgot to block or something. There's only one last thing to cover before we complete this guide, and that's the matter of Centurion's max out of stamina punish. To be honest, getting a heavy parry which leaves your opponent on no stamina is a bit underwhelming for Centurion damage-wise. The most damage that you can deal with the follow-up guard break is 45. This comes from the double lights to extinguish any regen stamina into a forward throw followed by a charged heavy. Follow this up with a confirmed non-charged jab and a free light. With that out the way, that's all I have for Centurion. If I missed anything important, then please let me know in the comments. Of course, if you fancy it, then feel free to like and subscribe for any future content. Thank you very much for watching.